Today's show is brought to you by Audible. Audible is offering our listeners a free audiobook with a 30-day trial membership. Just go to audibletrial.com/finishthefight and browse the unmatched selection of audio programs. Download a title free and start listening. It's that easy. Go to audibletrial.com/finishthefight.
This is Spartan 117.
Anyone hear me? Over.
Isolate that signal. Master Chief, you mind telling me what you're doing on that ship?
Sir, finishing this fight.
Welcome back, everyone, to Finish the Fight, a Halo podcast. I'm your host, Jesse Reiners.
And I am your host, Alex Kendall.
And as always, we're going to start this week's episode off with some updates. Two really big ones that kind of have everyone talking right now. The first one is Halo Reach coming to MCC for the Xbox has kind of been delayed for, I think I've read indefinitely for now.
Yeah, so it's still coming for flight testing. So there's no worries that it won't be included. But one of the biggest things that I don't think 343 looked at when they released the Master Chief Collection was the amount of memory that they'd have to deal with for each game on there. Yeah. And that, one, they're eating up your hard drive size. And two, you're basically packaging with Reach coming, that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 almost individual games, if you include both of the anniversary collections.
Yeah.
All under one roof with, even more Forge coming, even more Firefight, other things that they want to test. So we'll see what they end up doing and what their solution is. We did get to see some really creative bugs that they threw up online, which is really neat.
Yeah, we posted one on our Instagram, but there was a handful more of like jets killing, just regular soldiers and other things. So definitely go check that out because it was really cool. And even seeing the one we posted on our Instagram was actually an old bug in the Xbox 360 version. So it's kind of crazy to think that as they're porting this over, these bugs are kind of re-emerging.
Yeah.
Moving on to other news, let's talk about the Halo TV show. They've cast 6 more people for it, and it's pretty exciting to see that we have a Natasha McElhone as Cortana and Halsey. We have Bokeem Woodbine as Soren 066. We have Shabana as me as Admiral Margaret Parangaski. We have Bentley Kalu as an unnamed Spartan, Natasha Kolzak as an unnamed Spartan, and Kate Kennedy also as an unnamed Spartan. So it's kind of making me wonder where they're going to go because as we learned a few months ago, I think that they're not going to follow the canon. They're kind of going to go off on their own beaten path. So I'm really curious to see what's going to go on exactly.
I'm fine with it. I'm fine with having to not have restrictions on what all goes with and against the grain of what's been established. And I think it allows us as consumers of Halo media to go at it at a different point. I don't have to think like, well, back in episode 2 of this series of this thing, this one person said something. You can just kind of have this be your own story and you guys can embrace it as you want. If you really enjoy it, awesome. If you don't, awesome as well. Like enjoy it as a single piece of media that doesn't have to be dictated by parameters already set.
Well, yeah. Well, you also got to think is that we have video games, comics, books, like a million other things that if this goes sour, it's not the end of the world. Granted, this will be the first time we see an actual TV show. We've only had 2 actual full-length movies, so it's kind of odd to think that full live-action movies, but it's a lot of people are really banking on this to be good. I would like it to be good, but I digress. Either way.
Yeah, I'm excited for it because a lot of these actors and actresses are from Marvel movies, The Witcher coming up on Netflix, and a couple others in here which are really cool to see that they're staying, I guess, in the same wheelhouse of fantasy.
Yeah, fantasy sci-fi. So it's really cool. But, I guess only time will tell. It's going to start filming this fall. So we'll see what happens and if it's going to be any good or not.
And if you happen to be working on set on any of these, we would love you guys to send us some pictures.
Exactly.
Some sneak peeks.
All of our
bootleg copies of everything. You know how it is.
All of our film set listeners out there. So let's move on to the topic at hand for today. Halo Uprising. This is really, really exciting, and I actually had never read this before we started researching for this episode, so it was really cool initiative to get us to open up this comic book that we have on the table and go through it.
Well, it's cool because it's their first dive into an actual series of comics instead of just a collection of stories.
Yeah, and this was more so not them coming up with it. Instead, they worked with Marvel, and Marvel came up with this idea. So Halo Uprising is the first multi-issue comic from the Halo franchise published by Marvel Studios, acting as the bridge between Halo 2 and 3. 4 issues were released from August 2007 to April 2009. It was written by Brian Michael Bendis and illustrated by Alex Maleev. So let's dive a little more into Brian and Alex.
Sure. So as we said, with Bendis, he's an American comic book writer and artist, which helps having both of those ideas in your head as you're going through this. And so over the years, he's won 5 Eisner Awards for his work, which is honestly killer to get for any comic book writer.
He's won 14 awards total.
Yeah.
And that's just beyond those Eisner rewards. I think Wizard Magazine has given him some as well. And then he has 5 or 6 nominations on top of that.
And it makes sense because he was the man behind Ultimate Spider-Man, New Avengers, Age of Ultron, Siege, Secret Invasion, Secret War, and House of M. So I guarantee all of you have recognized several of his names. Even if you're not a comic book nerd like we are, you get the impact that he's had on the comic universe.
Yeah, and those aren't even including smaller one-off issues he's done for series as well.
And one really cool, unique thing with him is that he does take some inspiration from the likes of Frank Miller, but he gets most of his influence from those screen and playwrights, which is crazy.
Yeah, he's definitely a well-known, unique guy, and definitely reading interviews with him, he seems very, very lighthearted as well. I feel like he's that guy that can talk to anyone about anything.
And he's also that guy who happens to be teaching at the University of Oregon. So on top of being, a very accomplished professional comic writer and artist, he's taken those skills over to the university side of it and is, teaching the masses, teaching them young minds on how to write some beautiful comics.
Yep, I think that's literally the class he teaches is writing comic books, essentially, or at least writing the story for one. So let's move on to Alex Maleev. He is a Bulgarian comic book artist who regularly collaborates with Brian Michael Bendis. Alex is best known for his art in Batman, Hellboy, Daredevil, Spider-Woman, Civil War, and The Crow. Bendis also claims that Alex is a hardcore Halo fan. So I think that's really cool that instantly, one of the interviews I was reading, they're like, yeah, by the way, he's a huge Halo fan, so this will be a breeze for him. And the art speaks for itself in that sense.
It helps so much. I mean, you already have the background material that you need for all of this. You've been a fan, so you know what these creatures look like, how they respond, and what it takes for Master Chief to do things, Covenant hitting Earth. Things like that he's writing about in this is going to play a huge portion in how the art comes across and, how the storytelling goes, which is awesome.
Yeah, exactly. So now let's move on to writing the comic itself. After the success of the Halo graphic novel, Marvel and Bungie announced at the 2006 Comic-Con that they would be extending their deal and releasing Halo Uprising. The announcement itself was actually pretty vague, so a lot of people assumed it was going to be an ongoing series instead of a 4-issue series. Writer Michael Bendis actually part of the original pitch for Marvel to publish the graphic novel. So I think it's cool, kind of this full circle going around. And then when it came to writing Uprising itself, Bungie wanted to explore lesser known characters and events in the comic like they did with the graphic novel.
And it makes sense because what are you going to do? Do a retelling of something or try and push a super important piece of lore into it? I mean, it doesn't really make sense how you do that.
Well, yeah, because you got to think people have made this complaint with the books, but luckily Bungie was never really associated the games with the books. What if something major happens in this comic that will affect Halo 3? I think a lot of people would have been upset. So kind of the idea of the books and these games and these comics from here on out are to explore lesser known characters and events to really make you appreciate the upcoming game more. Now, Marvel publisher Dan Buckley approached Bendis as the writer for Uprising and also wanted Maleev as the artist. Bendis was pretty thrilled about this considering he was a longtime Halo fan in all mediums. He wasn't just, oh, I just like the games or the books. Like, he loved it as a franchise. And I think at one point he even referred to it as like the modern day Star Wars before Disney decided to buy Star Wars and keep pumping those movies out. But so yeah, he saw a lot of potential in this. And I think that's why he was very, very quick to jump on it. And he even said he felt no restrictions working with the canon or the lore because for the most part, kind of like with Ghost of Onyx, Bungie was like, listen, these are the few plot points we want you to touch on, but for the most part, just open it up to whatever you want to do. So Bendis and Maleev would pitch their idea to Bungie for Uprising, and Bungie would approve it. Bungie also asked Bendis if he wanted to make the setting in Cleveland, since that's where he's from. So I don't know if that was necessarily a coincidence, but I think he thought that they were trying to just be nice and do something cool, which I think that would have been cool if that was the case.
And that'd be really neat because one, he's already seen the cityscape and skyline of Cleveland, I'm sure. So you can kind of deal with that. But two, it's just really cool where it's like, it's your hometown. Do what you want to do. Like, you get to defend your hometown.
Yeah, as I said, they kind of left it open to how he wanted to do this and tackle this. He did struggle with the dialogue of Master Chief. Spoiler alert, he has like, what, 3 or 4 lines in all 4 issues?
Yeah, I think between that, it's just pretty much just trying to shut the mic up.
Yeah, and it's nothing like there's a lot of people talking to Chief, but he doesn't reply to them at all. So he initially threw out his first script for Master Chief entirely. So he instead let Maleev's art define the character, as he would say, which I think it works very, very well. Bendis also looked for Nyland's novels, and he looked to those for inspiration for writing this, and I think it shows a lot.
You definitely see it in this as opposed to the graphic novel, which were kind of everyone's own taking on one of their favorite parts or favorite ideas of Halo. This, you see, he actually did a lot of homework, a lot of research, and made it his own, but made it feel like it fit the flow perfectly.
Yeah, because even at one point, Bungie sent him the cinematics for a DVD of the cinematics for Halo 2 because he was never able to finish that game. And the main goal for this comic was to appeal to people who have never picked up a comic before. And I think that's always been the case when you see sometimes these one-off stories from franchises that wouldn't have never been in that medium anyways. So that was a huge thing for Bendis to try to do, was to not only get people to pick up that first issue, but to want to read the second one. And another cool thing kind of that we learned in development is that Bendis and Maleev were able to go to the Bungie office and get their hands on Halo 3 while it was still in development. So kind of these cool perks that happen when you write for Halo.
Yeah, it definitely helps. You go between the mediums with that.
So let's move on to the meat and potatoes. The comic itself, which, I mean, it was just already pretty stunning. Like, you see the cover itself, all 4 covers have Chief just looking like a badass. So the art alone, I think, can suck you in. Definitely that first one, Chief just standing there as there's a Covenant carrier, phantoms and banshees just over his head.
Yeah, I love it. And I love the different color palette that they chose for this because it starts with this like really kind of, I guess, sunsetty red. Best way to describe that, kind of going up and over Chief, kind of to get those blues and purples of the Covenant, which I think is just a really eye-catching cover. And then you've got that yellow and orange of his visor just stark right there in the center of the cover.
That contrast I've always loved about Chief's character, that no matter what, the visor always stands out. And Maleev does amazing job of doing that.
And to give you guys a quick synopsis of kind of what this story's going over, so this is the foreword for it. Master Chief Petty Officer Spartan 117, an enhanced super soldier equipped with Mjolnir assault armor and an array of tactical weapons, is stowed aboard the Forerunner Dreadnought, which is headed straight for Earth. The Master Chief must stop the Covenant, the hostile force controlling the Earthbound ship. The fanatical Covenant is bent on destroying humanity and ending all life throughout the universe by activating the devastating ring-like weapons known as Halo. Intertwined with the Chief's interstellar one-man war is the saga of a great American city's rebellion and downfall. The two disparate lives, shared fate, and the Covenant's hunt for an ancient relic of untold power and value on Earth. The Eisner award-winning team of superscribe Brian Michael Bendis and artist extraordinaire Alex Maleev unleash an epic story of mankind's struggle against the menace of deadly extraterrestrials. Halo Uprising, a standalone story arc, fills in the gaps between the conclusion of blockbuster video game Halo 2 and the hotly anticipated Halo 3.
I'm not going to lie. Even if I had never picked up a comic book and I was a Halo fan, I'd say definitely that description alone, as vague as it is, and we kind of learn more and more about every little plot point they touched on there, definitely would have sucked me in and made me want to pick up the first issue.
Yeah, it creates an interesting sci-fi story. And it goes to, even if you're a comic book fan and have never really played Halo, it dumbs it down a bit. It's like, these aliens are attacking. They're doing it for this reason. Mm-hmm. Come join us.
Yeah, this story, if you've never played Halo, this story alone, you don't ever need to play Halo. So let's go through the walkthrough of all 4 issues. It starts out with Master Chief on a ghost just going through the Dreadnought. And I like that someone from the IO station is trying to get a hold of him, but he's not responding, and it's Chief doing what he does, which is being a badass and just killing everything in sight.
And this is, besides the cover, where we really get the intro to the art style we're going to see for the rest of this. Because as opposite we see with the graphic novel, we had 4 distinct stories of 4 different artists, and then we had some covers that were from other artists. This, we're seeing a very succinct 4 issues. We're going to have the same art style going through, which is really cool. And I really enjoy the art style. And we'll talk a bit more of that when we get to the end of it. But yeah, it starts off awesome with Chief going out. And then we get a really cool title card page, which gives you the editors, the colorists, the artists, everyone's notice of what they did.
Yeah, and we see, I think we're outside of Jupiter, I think it says, and we see the Dreadnought going through space, being followed by some Covenant corvettes. And it's really, they really play off of Chief just being this badass, because it's just explosions, killing grunts, throwing grenades, just throwing everything at them but the kitchen sink, essentially.
Yeah, because we're learning that he's going through this, as we see at the end of 2, that he's going into plan to try and assassinate the Prophet.
Yeah, and this is his mission now. He's got some SMGs as well.
Yeah, and we're seeing some of those really, really cool art styles on the weapons themselves. And I love the panel that we're seeing with this, which you'll see right at the beginning, is Chief just tossing like 3 grenades, got this little trail
3 grenades
around
at
him.
once.
Yeah, because he's a comic book and not the game where I'm only allowed 2 now. But alas, I do digress.
And I mean, really, like, the first couple pages are him just going through, killing grunts, killing jackals. You even see this horrified expression of this grunt who's getting ready to die, and he doesn't have his methane on, so you can see his nasty little teeth.
Yeah, you see him like coughing it up. You see him kind of coughing up blood, and he's just kind of like bug-eyed with it, and he's just hit him with that.
Next scene, we get Chief shooting him. And so as this keeps on happening, Chief just being the Master Chief. I think they really played off Chief being like that cliche Master Chief that people would think of, like a civilian within that universe.
Yeah.
Like, he really is that Master Chief. So as this is going on, we see a familiar face, Colonel James Ackerson. And I think at one point they actually say, is it Ackerson or Ackerman? Like, I like that distinguishing between the languages, but he's hung up, he's bloody, he's being interrogated, and he's right outside of Mars.
Yeah, and we kind of hear before that he's going to be stationed there in, I believe it was in First Strike, whenever Halsey's kind of pulling documents down. And so this is just a little tidbit, which is kind of interesting story to take on it, because we've seen him in kind of the evil bad guy role that we thought of, and then as kind of like, okay, he's doing it to kind of help mankind with the Spartan 3 program, and then we see him in this odd predicament outside of Mars on a Covenant cruiser just latched up.
Yeah, he's bloody, and he hears about the brutes. They're going to say that they're going to invade Earth, and he says, well, good luck. He says, if you attack Earth, you're going to destroy the key of Asanalan. And they're instantly, their curiosity is piqued, and so they're asking, what is it? Where is it? And he says, all I know is that if you destroy it, the Halo rings will fail like they did last time.
Yeah, and trying to promise that, like, you'll never appease these prophets you're with, and, you're pretty much screwed. But I do know where it is. Yeah,
well, I like even at one point that the brute takes out a knife and just shoves it like in his like shoulder armpit area.
Yeah, so he's hung up. The best way to describe how he's hung up is, remember that scene in Incredibles when Mr. Incredible's hung up? It looks exactly like, not as cool.
Not as cool.
but hung up like that. And he basically takes a curved, almost like scimitar blade, and then kind of jabs it into the shoulder muscle.
Yeah, and you're seeing that he's getting tortured for this, and he says all I know is that it's in Cleveland, and kind of a comical thing is they're like, what's a cleave?
Yeah, they're like Cleveland. What is a cleave?
Yeah, what is a cleave?
And at this point, I guess as us being the comic reader, you can think of Ackerson in two ways, as he's kind of like this high commander who kind of just like bitched out on this and was like revealing that, Earth did have a relic, and we're like, are you serious? Like he was like, it's gruesome in the comic. Like he's bloodied, he's tortured.
You see the blood in his teeth.
Yeah, it was just an awesome detail. And you can just tell like he's obviously been here for a bit. He's tired, he's haggard out. And so starting with our next panel in the comic, we then see the classic invasion of Cleveland.
Of the cleave.
Yeah.
Yeah, and of course it's modernized, and we start seeing the Covenant making their way in and start destroying everything.
And this is the first place in the story where we start getting your typical kind of like, not comic thought bubbles, but they're the thoughts of a character in like the blocky text.
What was it, like Second Sunrise over New Mombasa?
Exactly, just like that.
That monologue in their head.
Mm-hmm. And you see it like in a lot of comic books, but especially like with Enter the Spider-Verse, when Miles Morales finally gets his spider powers, he's like thinking and bubbles are popping up. So it's like that.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's this character, in Cleveland of all places, I'm going to die today. Well, that's just great.
Yeah.
And so on this next page, we're then introduced to this character, these mysterious thoughts.
Yeah, it's a ruin. And he's basically kind of drinking away his sorrow. He's like, well, this is my life. I'm going to die. We learn that he works for the hotel. He's a concierge?
Yeah, he's a hotel concierge. So like he's been checking people in. He basically works the front desk at this high-end hotel. We learned that Cleveland is a vacation destination. And so he works in kind of like this, from what we can see in the architecture, it looks like a pretty nice hotel. Looks pretty modern, pretty cool. And we're seeing this panel, like you said, where he's just kind of mixing up some drinks and just kind of worrying his time away while a lot of people are running away in panic.
Yeah, and we can see also Maleev kind of interpret like what the future is going to be like, because he's randomly wearing these white gloves. And part of me wants to think, is that just the style? Is that what a concierge wears in 2500?
Yeah.
So all these interpretations are really cool, like we saw in Second Sunrise over New Mombasa.
And one thing you'll see in this, which is really interesting, is he took kind of real life faces and traced them on a lot of what we can call like the NPCs, or basically the background characters.
He does it a few times with the main characters too.
When he wants to like nail down some facial expressions or get something, he's like, okay, I need this kind of real life feel for it.
Yeah, and while he's drinking what appears to be sriracha,
it looks like a sriracha bottle.
The Covenant makes their way inside this hotel that he's in. So you kind of see this. He says, "Oh shit!" and like he hides under the table. Like, why the hell are they here?
Yeah, and so he's hiding. And we see a couple of Marines make their way in, and as the battle starts, we see our second main protagonist of this story.
There's a Myris Tyla.
I believe, yeah.
Yeah, Myris Tyla, and we learn she's a performer. And this is definitely not far off of, because Alex and I discussed this before. And I talked about how she kind of looks strange. She has this weird haircut or tattoos on her head. And you kind of reference like, well, it's like Madonna or Miley or Lady Gaga. Like,
yeah, she's a pop performer. And so she kind of checked herself in. And the assumption with Cleveland being this hot hotel vacation destination, she's probably performing local. Or
no, she says her boyfriend brought them there. And then remember, he went off to do something, and she's like, oh my God, my boyfriend just left me. And that's when Ruin's like, he's probably dead. Like, just out of nowhere telling the stranger that. So she freaks out and kind of attacks him over this while a Covenant invasion is happening behind them.
Yeah, and what I love is on the first panel that they meet, she just goes, we need some guns. Are there any in the back? And he's like, no. You're a concierge. You know where like the guards keep the guns here? And he's like, no, I have no idea. And so as they're doing this, she's kind of like taking out on him and like trying to take charge. A huge explosion happens and causes them to kind of fly out of their cover and start running away as this main battle between the brutes and the Marines goes off, and you've got warthogs and turrets and grenades going off in this hotel lobby now.
Yeah, and this is kind of where that conversation goes down, of him saying, your boyfriend's probably dead. Because he kind of, throughout this comic, he kind of acts like a chicken shit through a lot of this comic.
Because he seems like he cares about his life, but he doesn't. Because he's just like, we're gonna die. I mean, like I've kind of come up with that. They're destroying the world. We're gonna die. And so she's really the only one keeping both of them sane at this point, I guess. Because he's like, we're dead, and she's like, no, like we need to go do this now. So then at that point, when like great part is when he just goes, yeah, your boyfriend's probably dead. She just slaps him right across the face.
Smacks the shit out of him and gets on top of him to try to attack him.
Yeah. In between this.
Yeah, and they make their way out of the hotel and into the city, and we're starting to see the damage already done in such a short amount of time that the Covenant can inflict.
And I think one of my favorite panels, and really shows how badass that Amiris is whenever they're still in the hotel lobby, one of the Marines goes down right next to him. And so she just reaches over, grabs his sidearm, and then grabs a grenade and then just chucks it. Because they're like, we need to get to the parking garage. Chucks a grenade into this group of brutes, detonates it, and just cool, like, cool guys don't look at explosions type feel to it. They just start like running away towards the parking garage.
Well, she looks like a heroic jump, and he looks like he's just kind of like falling from it.
He's making his attempt. He's growing.
I like that you see like all these futuristic cars, but they get in this red hot rod looking car as they're trying to escape.
And then this is where we learn from people running back through the garage that basically all the streets and tunnels are closed. Like there's no way you can get to them. They're destroyed or debris is there.
Again, something we saw in Halo 2 and learned about in Second Sunrise over Newman Bossa. So he clearly did his research enough to know all of this stuff and to know like all of this makes sense. You could write a whole paper on the invasion of Earth itself and how the Covenant are attacking these certain areas and what happens in a city. They're going to shut down the tunnels and kind of get everyone to retreat to a central area. But then they decide that they need to make their way into the sewers because there's got to be a way out of this city because clearly Cleveland is the target.
Yeah, and you already have ground forces. We're seeing in several panels of Marines fighting around the corner, and there's still dropships coming in. So they're snaking their way around Old Cleveland, which is kind of like what Old Mombasa was, kind of like the lower income, smaller, dirtier area. And so they're thinking that's the best way to escape because as we see in this panel, they see two hunters up this pair of stairs.
And she just points the gun at them like that's going to do anything. That's not Halo 1 pistol, sweetheart. Like, let's figure that out right now.
And this is where you can kind of see Rowan knowing Old Cleveland. Like, no, let's do this. We need to plan this out and go this way because there's no way. If you've never seen hunters, understand what they are. Like, we can't do anything.
Yeah, he stops her. He pulls a gun up and is like, But then as they're making their way through, he turns a corner, and now Ruin has a plasma pistol straight in his face, and we see two jackals pointing their guns at them. And then later on we see it's also brutes, stealth brutes actually in this panel. But it's odd because you're like, well, they're not killing them. So we're starting to learn a little bit more of like, okay, they have their hands up and they're not dead yet, and they're clearly speaking their Covenant dialect.
And that's one thing I really appreciate from artists like this, that if you don't have a translator and they're not translating to English for any reason, it does show like their language and their dialect and the spelling and things like that. And they did that in the graphic novel as well. And I really appreciate those attentions to detail.
I would love, because there is a breakdown of the Covenant language to our alphabet. I would love to one day, if I had enough time on my hands, to go through these panels and see if this is like jargon or if they actually had some dialogue in there.
It's going to be fantastic, guys. Like, I'm really excited. Jesse just volunteered to do that. So he's going to go through every piece of Halo media that has Covenant not translated and translate it for us.
Eventually. So yeah, then we start to see all of these people being herded into the stadium by the Covenant.
Yeah, and that's where we see again those Covenant transports that we saw in Halo 2 going down in the underground highway. We're seeing them actually transport humans.
Yeah, that's how they're getting to the stadium. We're seeing like the Covenant themselves are being brutal, but as that's going on, we cut back now to Chief, who's in the middle of being that really, really cliche Master Chief killing off a bunch of grunts until he turns the corner and sees 6 hunters, guns drawn on him. And then they fire.
And they fasham him.
Yeah. The onomatopoeias on here are terrific, but it looks like he takes a good amount of it and falls on his ass. He takes probably all 6 shots, which arguments have been made in a situation like this. Like, why can other Spartans and, say, Ghosts of Onyx take that shot and die, but yet Chief takes 6 shots?
Chief plays it on easy. He obviously finds a shotgun.
Yeah, obviously.
In Halo CE. He obviously takes this and he's fine. Shields are blinking, but he's fine.
Yep. And so, yeah, at that point, then he's surrounded by grunts, but you can hear that the grunts are ordered to cease fire.
And then we get to the next panel. So we flip the page, we get to the next panel, and then we have a brute standing over him, calling him a demon.
Yeah, a chieftain. It's the golden one.
Yeah, it's your beautiful golden brute, decked out. Really cool way they drew the armor in this, which I really like. Little bits of details, like that kind of like little eye sun that's on his belt crest.
Once again, Alex Maleev fucking killed it.
Yeah.
Absolutely, through all 4 of these issues.
Yeah, and so as we see this beauty of a brute standing over Chief, he goes, "The key of Osnalan, you're going to give it to us." And he keeps like taunting him. He's like standing on top of his chest. He's like, "We're just gonna keep pulling bits of you until you tell us where it is."
You also see, like, you never realize in the game how freaking big these brutes are, because he has his foot covers all of Chief's chest.
Yeah.
And now we switch back, and this is where we see just tens of thousands of people in this stadium. And this is where the brutes are asking all the humans, like, we need the key. Like, you will be spared if you give us the key. And it looks like that almost these jackals are firing into the crowd as well, like maybe killing off some people to show like what they're gonna do.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting. I guess it's people probably either shit disturbing or causing a scene or causing panic,
trying to make their way out as well. Like they can see they're trying to escape.
Yeah, something like that. So you can obviously see, and they're all the brutes and jackals are in kind of like those floating watchtowers that you see across the maps.
Yeah,
in
Halo 3. Yep.
And they're just doing oversight. And this is actually where the brute is communicating in English, or in an Earth language. It's English specifically here, to everybody. And they're asking. He's like, you are prisoners of war. If it wasn't for us needing something here, you'd all be dead. And you need to lead us for the key of Osnalan. And he said, whoever it is, step forward.
Yeah, you'll be rewarded. And this is the point where Ruin says, "Oh my God, I know exactly what that is."
Yeah, because everyone in the crowd is panicking, like, "What? I've never heard of that. What is that?" He's like, "I know
it's
exactly
literally
what
equivalent.
that is."
If I came up to you, I was like, "Give me the key of Osnalan," and you're just like, "What?"
Yeah, like I don't know what that is. Like I'll help you, but you have to tell me more. And he's just like, this. And so this is the end of our first issue.
Yeah, which I think I like that cliffhanger, because Bendis even said that each issue will leave you with a bunch of cliffhangers. And so we see Chief is currently under the foot, literally, of a brute chieftain, and Ruin knows what this key is.
Yeah, and so we now definitely cement the importance of our 2 new main characters as being crucial of what Ackerson said whenever he was held captive to now. So we're trying to piece that together, like, okay, if Ackerson said it, is he like some type of like planted agent? Is he planted Oni? Like, there's so many ideas that you can kind of think of. That's how are these two? How do people know about that if no one else does except for these 2 individuals?
Yeah, why do these 2 know about this? So instantly, I could definitely imagine the second I was done reading this issue being like, oh my God, I need another one. Luckily, we bought the hardback book. Or the hardback issue. So like the second I saw that, I was like, oh my God, I just turned the page and I was like, I'm sold. I got to keep going.
Yeah, we have the luxury of reading it now, so we don't have to wait.
We'll go into that at the end of the episode.
Oh, yeah.
So yeah, now we're at the second issue. And this art's pretty cool because we have Chief on a chopper coming from an explosion.
And what's cooler? Tell me something that's cooler than not looking at an explosion. We saw it earlier. We see it now, and we see such a cool, and this is one of the really cool artist renditions of a chopper that really shows, for me, the dimension and size of it, that you're really seeing this spec. It's really, really cool. It has nothing to do with the issue, spoiler, but it's really, really awesome art to go along with it.
Yeah, that was one of the things, is that each issue, it shows Chief on Earth or doing something that has nothing to do with the rest of the comic. One of the issues, he's holding a gravity hammer, which is actually the cover for this episode that we used. He never touches a gravity hammer, but it doesn't matter. It's something to suck you in. We talked about that like with Ghosts of Onyx too.
And now we're into issue number 2, and right away we start with that brute on top of Chief. And we start this issue just like we started the first issue with a radio call. Sierra 117, can I get a radio check over?
He's in his comm as he's got a 1,200-pound brute on him.
Yeah, he's just as calm as can be while he's like, I'm going to rip you limb from limb, demon.
Yeah, and he's wanting that key. Like, what does this mean? Where can I find it? And Chief tells him, says, it means always. And the brute's like, what? Like, tell me again. And, Chief says, it means always. He says right here, it means always strip your enemy of weapons before you interrogate them. And throws a sticky grenade right between his legs.
Yeah, it's great. And I love, once again, going to the little details of comics, that when Chief is saying this, that brute right on top, you see a little tack, like a little arming sound for this plasma grenade, and he just shoves it right onto him. You see Chief just staring at him, and then the brute just kind of has that panicked, what do I do?
My balls are gone here in a second. Yeah, so and that I think is probably one of the first, if not the first line we hear from Chief so far. I don't know if he may have said one line in the first issue.
The only thing he said earlier was telling Io to shut up. It was like, Io, quiet.
I am trying to kill the prophet, trying to end this war. But yeah, and then after this explosion, we see once again just the size of the dreadnought, and it's still traveling through space. And probably, I'm going to have to put it hands down, probably one of my favorite illustrated panels that I've seen in a comic in a while, because of the attention to detail of this explosion of that plasma grenade, and just the tonality that he uses for, one, the grenade itself with various blues and hints of that, but this arcing striping of the background. Yeah. That's imagine if a ship went into slip space and you get that kind of drawback distance thing. It looks like that, but just very pretty. Yeah, it, once again, kills it throughout all these issues. And then now we're left with a bunch of grunts who are now at the mercy of Master Chief. And it just goes through Chief being Chief and killing all these grunts. You kind of see the charred remains of that brute. And so now we're back at that stadium, and Ruin's back again saying okay, I know what this key is. And, Myris is like, you do. But then all of a sudden the brute asking blows up. And we see that ODST are coming in to save everyone. They're dropping off of Hornets. And I actually, if you were so hyped about Halo 3 and you wanted to know any little detail that you may have not already known.
This right here.
Yeah, you're seeing things like the Hornets, and you see the Scarab later on, and these levitating towers. All this stuff that it was cool. You can see, clearly they had an insight to what was going on, so they could use this, or Bendis and Maleev. That way they could integrate this stuff into the comic itself. So as they're being rescued, Ruin and Myris are going to try to escape.
And so as all this carnage is happening, as they're trying to escape, there's flames, there's grenades, there's guns going off. You get this myriad of panels on this actually dark gray page, which is interesting to see at first. And you see that all of this now is from Myris's point of view. And she's talking about how, she really screwed up her. It's like almost like a life flashing before your eyes type thing. Because she's like, I really fucked my life up. My dad was right. I should have done something else.
Written more of my own music.
Yeah, written more of my own music, and less that the pop junkies told me to do. And I wanted to fall in love. I wanted to do this, and it's like life flashing before your eyes. And she's talking about how the media just really wanted her for her body, and that's what she did, and changed us up. And she hopes her boyfriend's dead, but really she doesn't. But she kind of does, but she doesn't because she doesn't. And it's just it's like the whole internal monologue, trying
going back and forth, the angel and the devil on your shoulders.
Yeah, and thinking your way through all this stuff.
Yeah, and then eventually Ruin, it's kind of, we see that he was going to make his way out, and he comes back and he gets Myra, and she gets her hand on a plasma pistol throughout all of this, because it's I like all these small little boxes showing everything that's happening.
Yeah, and it's just little snippets, because we're still in her head.
Yeah, we're still seeing her kind of monologue, and she's like, when I make it out of here, I'm gonna do things my way. I'm gonna play my own songs the way I want to. So she's kind of like, if I make this out of here, I'm completely changing my life and I'm doing what I want to do.
Yeah, and changing it up. And what I love is you seen that last panel. She's Rowan. I knew he had a name, like, because they never exchanged names except for her. He knew who she was because he's like, I love your music. Like, I have songs, and so she's like, oh, I saw his name tag. What was it? Rowan. Just trying to go through it, and then she's like, I could marry him. Yep. He likes my music.
Yeah, because that was a thing.
Me.
He says at one point, as there was like a minute or two downtime, he's like, hey, I like your music, by the way.
Yeah.
Which she's a famous pop star, but she's still surprised for someone to say that because she doesn't even like her music.
Yeah, and to like actually genuinely like it, not just fangirl about it. He was just kind of like, yeah, I like your music. You do a good job.
Yeah, because she says, I can marry him. Like, he likes my music. He didn't leave me like my boyfriend did. I think his name was Philip. That she says. Yeah, and like when Alex and I were going through this earlier, this panel that everyone is escaping from this stadium, Alex had pointed out, like, this panel, you can really see real faces of people screaming and trying to escape from all these explosions.
Yeah, if you want to know the panel, it's the shaboom, faboom, kraboom, boom panel.
We also have some faboom, boom, boom, scree, boom, boom, faboom.
Yes.
Scree.
So yeah, we're doing some mumble rap for you guys real quick as we get through this. No, it's so. You're seeing them outside of the stadium with a couple other people who are going frantic and hectic, and the stadium itself is just rupturing. It's just exploding, blowing up, and we then see a panel is like, we need to get out of here. Where are we going? Old Town? All right, let's try and go this way. And then as they start to walk,
they see a warthog.
They're like, all right, that's probably going to help us, or at least there's like Marines we can talk to that are right there, but it gets hit.
Yeah.
It takes a fat plasma blast. And so they make their way over to what looks to appear to be a blown out warthog, kind of one of those passenger hogs.
Yeah. Or a troop hog or whatever.
Yeah. And it still works. It looks like every warthog I drive, because I can't drive them well, so they're just torn apart. But it still is drivable. And so they start it up. They start driving. They're like, "Where are we going? How do you know how to drive? I don't know. Let's just go. Like, let's just try and figure this out. We don't know what we're doing."
Shooting from the hip, essentially. Because in this situation, if you don't know what you're doing, just go.
Yeah, just go, get out of there. Like, they're trying to make their way out. And, they've kind of established that camaraderie bond since the hotel. So they're kind of forming their own little troop to get out and figure things out together.
Well, they know at this point, like, they need to stay together to survive because they've been helping each other at this point.
And so now we make our way back to Old Town, which is the area where they were first captured. They're talking about, is it good to stop here? I don't know. It's a good thing that we were able to make it out. And so at this point, from the last battle, as we saw in some of those panels, they're both equipped with a plasma pistol.
When you see them holding them, they look huge in their hands because that's the proper scale. Because to go off a little bit of a topic, I remember at one point, I think it was Brian Gerard and Frank O'Connor talking about how they received these life-size models of the plasma pistols, and you couldn't actually physically put your hand over it. They had to scale them down for when they started selling them. So little details like that, you got to appreciate them.
And it makes sense because you figure you have a plasma coil that you charge up and overcharge to emit a huge blast. It can't be this like pea shooter.
Yeah, it only seems that way because a 7-foot Spartan and 8 and 9 foot aliens are holding them to make them look like that. We see then that Myris sees some grunts walking, and she charges that baby up and just fires at them.
And I have to say, it's satisfying
because they just blow up. And this is where all of a sudden she's questioning that idea of like, oh my God, I just killed them, or I killed it.
Yeah, it's that same feeling. I personally don't have it because I don't do it, but it's that same feeling as if you're hunting or in war. If you take your first life, it's kind of that morality question of like, what did I just do?
Well, it's always interesting, like in a situation like war, like back in like the 1700s, like when it was the gentleman's war and we had the standoff, typically when two men would come up to each other to fight each other, one would run away because we're not capable of killing even our enemies. So for this situation, like regardless, like she just can't believe what she did.
And she almost goes catatonic with it because she's like, she just keeps saying, I killed it. I killed it. And he's like, listen, like Rowan's trying to like snap her back. He's like, listen, it was you or them. like we need to get a hold of ourselves. Like it was going to kill you if you did not kill it.
Yeah, it's something that she kind of needs to realize for them to survive. But then now everything's settled down. You know, Myra's is kind of snapped out of it. So they're going through the Warthog to see if there's any kind of rations or supplies that they can use.
Yeah, and this is nice too, because this is one of those moments where it was high pressure forever, and now that they have downtime, they're kind of joking. Because Rowan says, when this is over, I'm going to get me one of these, talking about the Warthog.
Yeah, I think that's like a little call to like the civilian Warthog that was in Halo 2. They find some uniform, not so much uniforms, but like forest green shirts that they change into.
Well, they find like basically a full kit of field supplies, because they're trying to look for a radio to try and radio the Marines for, to pick them up or figure out where they are. So they're trying to look for a radio to radio the Marines or whoever can come help them. They find this box of, I would assume, field supplies. So it looks like they're finding electronics in there, a canteen, flares, clothing. And so they throw a flare down, kind of a fire. It's, a campfire, as they say.
Yeah.
And they start to change out of their civilian clothes and put on these kind of fatigues that they find in the vehicle.
And, even as this is going on, Myris is still kind of bringing up how she killed that grunt. Like, that's still kind of weighing in on her.
And I think for her, too, she is still kind of gripping with, I think what anyone grips with in war is, why are we killing each other? Like, why was it going to attack me? Like, what did I do to set them off?
Yeah. Well, first off, it's a grunt, so it was forced to. So you should have killed it. Because, it didn't know any better.
And so they're having this really nice heart-to-heart. And that is where Myers admits, she's like, I was going to leave you. Like my jerk boyfriend left me. I was going to leave you, but I'm so embarrassed. I'm sorry. He's like, listen, you're in shock. I mean, I get it. It's okay.
And he even admits that he's in shock, too. They're both in shock, which is very natural.
Yeah, he's like, I want my life back. Like, I hate it, but I hate my life as this concierge, but I would give anything to have that life back over this. And so this is where you start to see them, this really cool kind of, this like side-by-side panel. You kind of see them do that kind of fall in love. Like
their faces slowly drift towards each other. Their lips are slowly drifting towards each other.
Yeah, and I like this too because you get both sides. When Miris was thinking earlier, she's like, and he likes my music, and like I think this is his name, and like he introduces himself, and he's like, yeah, and I know yours. Like I have your music, I really like it, and she's like playing that coyness, like, oh really, you do, and he's like, yeah, I do, and you're really good, and I bought it, and I did this. And so they're having this really cool heart to heart where like he's really talking her up and then they start to like flirt with it. And it's a really cute moment. It's one of those cool things that is really cool to see like in any of these kind of post-apocalyptic or war stuff where there's still that human side of it that's still included.
Yeah. Well, Bendis isn't only showing this from a civilian perspective like Second Sunrise over New Mombasa, because that guy still worked for the government. He's still seen this. He's showing this from two normal everyday people, and you start to realize that a hotel concierge and a famous musician are the same kind of person when they're under the attack of an alien race.
Yeah, when you strip anyone of whatever accolades they have in this area and you put them in this new one, it's the same thing as if you start a new job. Like you could be the head of job here and you go to this, or what's really big for everyone growing up, you're in 8th grade, you're top of that middle school, now you're low grade in high school.
Exactly.
Top of high school, low in college. And what I love here too is she finally admits, she's like, I've thought about it, and if we make it through, we're going to have to get married. And so she said earlier, they'd get married just for the story, and he reiterates that. It's like, we'd have to get, obviously, just for the story.
Yeah, kind of that joke. And right before, as this conversation is going on, they're leaning in for that kiss. And right before something happens, or, they kind of stop. And they're almost embarrassed that they were getting ready to kiss, but then they're like, it's okay. But then all of a sudden they hear these noises, kind of like those, like let's say like the Jurassic Park, the Tyrannosaurus Rex is stopping.
Yeah, you're hearing ka-chunk, which is obviously like a big noise. And you hear this ka-chunk, 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 ka-chunk.
And they're like, oh my God, they're coming.
And then that's when we see it, Halo 3 Scarab.
Halo 3 scarab, and it is beautiful. And you can see there are some brutes walking by it, and you can just see the pure size of it. So they dipset. They get the hell out of there.
Yeah, and you see them just start to sprint out as this Ka-Chunk-King's going by and try and hide where they can. I mean, because it's obviously this huge mechanism, and it's broadcasting out, and they're hiding away.
And so Myris is kind of wondering, like, what do they want? Like, do you remember that thing that they wanted? And now we're going back to the key. Like, now we're going back to that being a central plot point. And Ruin's like, yeah, I know what they're talking about, but I feel like I'm going insane because, like, there's no way I should know what that is.
Yeah, he's like, there's no way at all I should know what this is, or that they know what it is, or that it's the same thing that I'm even thinking of.
Well, I think one reason, like, the name is so unique, Azanalan, is because it's like it needs to be so unique that only one or two people should ever recognize that name or know what it is. And then, you know, as he's kind of like trying to figure out what the hell's happening, now we go back and we're on the Dreadnought and we see Chief. I kind of like this shot of Chief just like peering over the corner, like sneaking, because he's making his way through the Dreadnought. He's trying to find the Prophet because again, he has that mission. I'm going to kill this Prophet. I'm gonna finish this fight.
Yeah, and so he peeks around. He sees some grunts. And then this is where we get this really cool full-page rendition of Chief pointing two SMGs at what would be like camera, I guess you would say, kind of right at that front frame. And it's beautiful because you see like this explosion across his visor and just like this just gorgeous work there. And what I love is you still see the residual plasma burn from that grenade.
Yeah,
on
you
his
still
armor.
see his armor damaged from all of that.
We see Chief go through. He now has a carbine, and he's peering down from this catwalk that he's on. And he peeks around and gets to a window, and we see what looks like a kind of a bottom platform, some stairs in the ship, and some of those little like Covenant crates sitting around.
And then we see the panel say the Prophet of Truth and his guards. And we see those brutes from Halo 2 that have the Honor Guard armor on. And they're all surrounding the Prophet of Truth. And so now Chief comes into Io Station, or he mentions like, hey, by the way, they're looking for this key. Like, do you take that all the way to the brass? And then we see him move his target right over the Prophet of Truth's head. And he says, more to follow. And that's the end of the second issue.
And it's been a really exciting one. I mean, we're starting to see, obviously, end on a huge cliffhanger with Chief, who has that reticle targeted right on to the Prophet. And then we have our two lovebirds now, as we see them, trying to escape through the city and away from basically another chunk of that Covenant invasion, because as we've learned, with all these Covenant invasions, they send in troops to soften up and then finish up with scarabs and other artillery to come in to kind of take it over.
Yeah.
And so then we hear from Io Station, there's transmission incoming.
Yeah. And what's that
What's that
transmission
transmission?
say?
I believe they're saying, if the audience hasn't, they should try out Audible.
Oh, yeah?
Oh, yeah. Because today's show is brought to you by Audible. Audible is offering our listeners a free audiobook with a 30-day trial membership. Just go to audibletrial.com/finishthefight and browse the unmatched selection of audio programs and download a title free and start listening today. It's that easy. Go to audibletrial.com/finishthefight to get started today. And one of the things we do recommend with our upcoming one is Contact Harvest.
Yep, that'll be 2 episodes from now.
Yeah, so 2 episodes. So we've got our next one's going to be a little surprise.
Yeah, we ain't going to tell you just yet.
Yeah, I mean, you're going to figure it out. It's Halo 3. But the one after that is going to be Contact Harvest with our very own Joseph Staten, right in that book.
Yep.
So check that out. And once again, that to download your free audiobook, go to audibletrial.com/finishthefight. And again, that is audibletrial.com/finishthefight for your free audiobook. Thank you again, Audible, for sponsoring today's podcast.
And now we're on the third issue, which is actually the cover, the cover art we used for this episode is Chief standing on a pile of grunts holding that big ass gravity hammer.
Yeah, it's beautiful. And it's got this kind of really cool wreckage. Once again, a beautiful sunset. Chief only works at, dusk time.
Yeah, depending on the time of year. So yeah, this is probably like this is about 4:30 in the afternoon.
He's a 4:30 kind of guy. He's just getting off work, and his after work deal is just to bash some grunts.
And so now that we move our way into this issue, and we actually see two kids playing, and I like that it's in the 2500s, but you can see they're almost wearing like cardboard and paper armor that these children have made. So kind of really grounding this idea that even though it's in the future, these kids are still kind of being kids. And
what do you want them to have? You want them to have motherboard armor?
I don't know, man.
You want them to have like cyborgs crawling across them? They're just kids. They made some sweet armor out of boxes.
But regardless, we see these kids playing, and we see the name Ruin come up. And he says, Ruin, take the key of Osnalon and take it to the castle to the North Hills.
Yeah, so it looks like, two friends, two brothers. We don't really know at this point yet. We just know that they are kind of playing make-believe. They're playing like a Dungeons and Dragons type thing.
Fantasy thing.
Yeah, because they said, oh, the dragon, like, I don't see it. Where is it? It's like, you know what? The dragon's up to you. And then that's when the older of the two says, here's the key. Like, take it to the North Hills. I'll take the dragon. And it's foreshadowing some events that we're going to see coming up in the issue, because we have the older one of the two says, but I have to fight the dragon. I'm going to be the one that has to do that. Your job is to take the key of Osnalon.
I don't know. Let's just move on from. We're going to say
take the key.
We're going to say the key from the rest of the issue.
Yes, take the key. Because he's older. He has to fight the dragon, so you're going to take the key, little dude.
And so, yeah, the older brother wants to take, or the older friend, brother, whatever you want to call him, we don't know yet. Might have spoiled it there for you, whatever. Takes, he's like, hey, I need to take this. I need to go slay the dragon. You can go and you can see the princess, but you have to take the key and go unlock it. And at this final panel, he says, have it there, you fire-breathing ass face.
And I love it. And you can see, as unfortunately, these brothers, these brothers are just like, the older one's just teasing him, and it's fantastic because he says, oh, you want to kiss a dragon? And the little one's like, no, I want to kill the dragon. He goes, you said kiss. You're a dragon kisser. I said, I said, cool. I love little stuff like that.
Yeah, definitely seeing like just brothers be brothers, essentially. And then we see this shot of young Ruin, and then it instantly goes to this old shot of like, you see him as a kid, he's energetic, youthful, and then this modern shot, he just looks sad and beaten down, and he's still kind of in the sewers of old Cleveland.
Well, it brings back that last frame that we saw when he was saying, I feel like I'm going insane.
Yeah.
And it's that perfect, movie industry feel where like you have like the younger face superimposed over the older one. That one goes away and you see it. So it's like the same exact positioning. It's really a beautiful shot.
Yeah. And now he's explaining to Myris once again, like, I know what this key is. Like I want you to confirm that you heard that they were asking about this specific key. And she's like, yeah. He's like, and this is where he says, I made this key up. He says, my brother and me, we made this up when we were kids. So it's kind of crazy to think like, oh my, like, why is it that, or now we're kind of figuring out like, okay, Ackerson knows about this, Ruin knows about this. These two brothers made this up when they were kids. So now we're kind of making this connection like, oh my God, that's Ackerson.
Yeah, it's Colonel James Ackerson.
Ackerson and his brother.
Yeah, and you see that he's kind of babbling on. It's like, we used to, play Knights and Dragons, and it was a thing we made up for this game we played.
And at this point, Myris is just like, what are you babbling on about? Like, what are you talking about? Because I can only imagine being in her situation. Like, this guy is like, I made up this thing that this alien race or this alien faction is looking for. This alien faction that we've been at war with for 25 years. I made up that thing that they're looking for.
With my little brother.
Yeah, when we were kids, and we never really talked about it since. So now he's just trying to like reassure her, like, listen, I made this up. And that's kind of, and anytime he tells someone from there on out, and rightfully so, they're like, wait, you made this up with your brother? Because no matter how crazy the world is right now, that's crazier.
And he brings up that, he keeps saying, Asanalon. She's like, yeah, that's what I heard. Asanalon? It's not a common word.
Yeah.
And she's like, well, I don't know. Maybe we all heard it wrong. And he's like, I heard it. I heard what it was.
Two people heard that exactly as they should have.
Yeah. And so he's just kind of, because as you would do, this alien race somehow knows your little kid code. And you're like, I don't know. Could it be something else? Could it be this? And after this, like, I don't have any idea why they know that, but I do know that my brother is a higher up in the military.
Now we're truly like, okay, yes, they are brothers. Ruin and Ackerson are brothers. Or I should say more, James and Ruin are brothers.
Oh, exactly. And what I love is that he knows that his brother, is in the military. He's like, oh, he's spec ops. And
whatever that means.
Yeah, whatever that means. But we don't really talk that much.
Myris kind of suggests, like, maybe your brother told the Covenant about this, which we already knew that. Spoiler alert.
Yeah, but he's like, why would they believe that he makes this key up? Like who would ever believe this key? And she's like, I don't know. And so they just decide, well, okay, we need to figure something out. Let's get out of here. And they start to load up
that troop hog.
Yeah, because he says, let's go. We're going to go find my brother.
Yeah, which is he barely even knows where he is, but their mission now they have this. It's not surviving anymore. It's like, we need to find my brother because apparently there's a reason he told the Covenant about this key.
Yeah, that's the only explanation because, he's kind of connecting those dots, and that's what a little conversation sidebar was him kind of starting at point A and getting all of those things that kind of get him to point Z, to Amazon it, as you might say, and get it there. And so they load up, and I love this other little frame they have where you have Myris in the back holding an assault rifle, and he's driving through, and they're basically just this kind of badass duo now.
Yeah. So now we're back to Chief. And he has his eyes on the prize. He still has that reticle on the Prophet of Truth. And as he's getting ready to, he hears IO Station coming back. And as he's getting ready to pull the trigger, a jackal from behind him shoots him, and he falls down from that catwalk onto the platform.
Yeah, and my favorite thing from this is as he's still scoped into his head, you see that the Prophet is asking, the commander says, and do we still believe that the demon is still aboard? Is he still alive? And they said, yeah, we haven't found him or are not really sure. Like, we'll figure it out for you. And he's got that reticle just directly on his head. Like, he's like, I don't know, maybe he's here. And so yes, so he gets shot and flies down.
And this is where he lands right in front of God and everyone and the Prophet of Truth. And Prophet of Truth at first looks scared as hell. He does, turn around and shoot that jackal that shot him like straight through the mouth out the back of the head.
It's one of those cool ass comic panels that's like strip, 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 strip. And it's just like watching him tumble through and able to put a shot, straight through the jackal's mouth.
And so after Chief takes care of that jackal, he turns around and goes to shoot at the Prophet. But, those stands that they sit on have beams and instantly shoots one straight at Chief. So afterwards, then, Chief starts shooting at him, but he has this kind of smug shit-eating look on his face because now he has this kind of shield up. And all of the carbine shots are just reflecting off of it, and he slowly backs away into a door, and the door shuts in front of him.
Yeah.
The Prophet of Truth. He backs up.
Yeah, the Prophet of Truth backs up because he had basically his brute honor guard around him trying to deal with it. And, he had his own defenses. Yeah, and then he puts up his little orb, just giving that little smirk as like backs up that door.
Like, see ya, bitch.
Closes it. And then
we have this shot of Chief, kind of recovering from what just happened. And he's surrounded by over a dozen brutes, including a brute chieftain with the gravity hammer, all getting ready to pounce and strike. And he only has one spike rifle getting ready to fight all of them. And then the narrative goes back to Ruin and Myris.
Yeah. So we get back to them and like after his unfortunate devastation. And by this point in Cleveland, it's daytime. We were dealing in most of the night after that attempt to figure out what the key was at the stadium.
Yeah.
And so now we're in the morning, and it starts off with them, little classic road trip humor. You know where you are, kind of.
Kind of, yeah. And then they run in front of a bunch of brutes. But it's so different from how they met in the beginning to where now they're kind of like know what they're doing because Myris, however we pronounce her name, just starts shooting at all these brutes.
Yeah, she just opens up, and then she
got an assault rifle.
Yeah, she opens up with the assault rifle that she had, and so she's in the back transport area, and so he hits the brakes, tries to swerve around, and then we get hit with a big old fa-boom.
And then what pops on the hood of the Warthog but a brute's severed head.
Yeah, and so they come to a screeching halt right when that explosion happened. And so as they're reveling in their victory over it, overhead they see a Pelican dropship.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, which you could kind of assume maybe was the cause of that explosion, or maybe it was her. It's never really fully disclosed.
And I think for her, her thing was more of like, I never thought I could really do that. And they were like, oh, I didn't think so either.
Yeah,
so
trust me, mutual thought.
Yeah, I think it's kind of assumed that the Pelican kind of came in, saw this Humvee, driving around, and wanted to go ahead and help them.
Yeah, seeing, fighting civilians or someone fighting. So after all that, they meet up with soldiers, and basically Ruin's like, hey, I need to find someone who knows Ackerson. And luckily, one of the soldiers does say, like, Ackerson, like, I do know that guy. But the second they kind of, they find each other, we see a troop transport just crash into everyone because there's a bunch of civilians there, too. So, instantly, like, we kind of get this, okay, we're going to make some headway on Ackerson, and then instantly just stuff starts going to shit.
Yeah, and it's not known if it's shot out of the sky, because we do see another Pelican up there, if that was shot down or where it was coming from. But yeah, this checkpoint that seemed to be where they drove up upon with that Pelican has now been either bombarded or ambushed by debris or whatever they did with it. But the one thing that pops up, so like they kind of recover. It's kind of that dazed recovery you see in games and movies where like their ears are ringing and they're kind of looking around to help. And you see Rowan's panel, you see his brother, see James as a young kid.
Yeah, holding up the key and smiling and looking at him.
And so he comes to, and then he sees Myris, and they look at each other like, "Are you okay?" No, I'm not. She's, no, let's try and figure this out. And she says, well, my motto used to be, if you're feeling shitty about yourself, just imagine there's someone in the world in a worse situation than you. And then this is where we then see Chief.
Yep. Well, yeah, we just learned that there's someone in a worse situation because we see now two different, the two style chieftains we see in Halo 3, and we see every kind of, ranking brute there, and Chief just picks up the spike rifles and goes to town on them. We see, spikes just tearing through the brutes like butter, and they're speaking their Covenant dialect. And this whole really...
Which going back, Jesse will translate for everybody.
I will translate one day if they are using the proper dialect on the comic.
All right, I'll allow it.
If they are, I swear to God I will.
All right, I'll allow it.
I swear to the Forerunners I will. But yeah, this whole scene is cool, this fight scene, because at one point you see Chief just, actually use the spikes on those spikers and, shoving it straight through a brute's face and shooting through their faces, like...
Yeah, because I think one of my favorite parts is when he takes the spiker and just shoves it into his chest. You see the blades, the dual blades, stick out of his back.
Yeah, pop out the back.
And he's still firing the spiker through him.
Man, really, this comic paints Chief to just be a badass. If you're not convinced by now that Master Chief isn't just the baddest Spartan out there, this comic will change your mind. Hands down.
And still, one of the greatest things I love about this, and going back to that main panel we saw where he was surrounded by, the jetpack brutes, the chieftain, and all the variety of them, you could still see that his armor is still more damaged than before. And what I love is you see weapon damage. So when he is picking up that spiker, you see that it has some wear and tear just from being a used weapon.
Yeah. And now these weapons are covered in brute blood.
Yeah, now they're super used.
And once this carnage has settled, Chief is surrounded by the bodies of dead brutes and their blood. And it shows this top-down view of this scene that's very eerily similar, if not an exact recreation of the beginning of Halo 2. That kind of court where the Arbiter is being tried for letting the original ring explode.
Yeah, and that huge amphitheater, because you've got that stadium seating, you've got the stairs leading up to it, and... I still love, and we'll bring up, because we did jump over this a little bit, who like the colorist and a couple other people were, because he did a fantastic job.
Absolutely.
With the tonality of it and showing the brute blood just all spouts all over. It's really cool.
Yeah.
And so after we view this carnage, we actually go back to our two protagonists. And they have made their way aboard the Pelican. And it's them and a bunch of civilians. So it's basically, it's what we could kind of figure out from the beginning was a checkpoint out of the city.
Yeah. And
so it's them two standing together, and across the way, they see an older man and older woman and this child sitting there. And Miras looks down and is like, "Are you doing okay, sweetie? Like, do you know where your parents are, where your mom is?" And she actually brings out a like little holotron thing.
Yeah, it's like kind of triangular rhombus looking shape.
And you see that, you know, it's her, and it's her during performing. She's like, "I really like your music," and she's like, "Oh, sweetie, that's nice."
This character, kind of learning more about her, she's always underplaying her own music, even though two strangers now have recognized her, but like, "I really like your music."
Yeah, and she's like, "Oh, thank you so much." And then we kind of get abrupt away from this really sweet interaction. It says, "You looking for Ackerson?"
Yeah, so we're now, we see this, you know, Marines say, you know, he's on Mars, or, you know, that's the last that we knew until the Covenant attacked. And Rowan's like, let me get there. Like, we need to get to Mars. And he's kind of like, you don't understand. Like, we have no more Mars. Like, well, first of all, you got to think, we lost reach a minute ago, so we're probably going to lose everything up until Earth.
Yeah, because we don't have any defenses or military bases as big and as large defensible as what we had now towards Earth, which Reach being the second basically most well-defended area we had. And so we see with that Marine kind of reconfirming that we lost Mars, Rowan's like, you lost? And I think he kind of gets that realization about his brother, but then Miras jumps in, you know, as that co-pilot with him and is like, well, maybe we should try. Maybe we should try anyhow to see if we can get there. Because if the Covenant are here, and so she's really trying to help, but that Marine's like, listen, if UNSC Mars is wiped, like, or if they're here, UNSC Mars is gone.
Yeah,
like,
absolutely.
There's no way. But they keep trying to have hope. He's like, well, you know, Rowan asks, maybe he's captured. Like, there has to be some explanation, like a prisoner, you know? And that Marine tries, he's really trying to be like, hey, listen, I don't mean to be mean, but if that were the case, like, let's hope he's dead then. Because what we know from the past of Covenant taking any prisoners is, one, they don't, but two, if they do, like, it's going to be a bad time for them, and they would wish they would have died there on the spot.
And we see that. That's how the comic starts, with Ackerson being tortured and having these blades just dug into him.
And now we see really what that was all about, because we have Rowan trying to explain to the Marine, I am his brother. We made that up as kids. And they're like, what the fuck are you talking about? I don't understand. Like, what are you saying?
We once again get people being like, You're crazy. What are you talking about? And he has to re-explain, like, I know it's crazy, but we made this up as kids.
It was a game. It's not real. And then I love the Marine in the bottom left panel. She's like, you gotta be shitting me.
Well, again, in a time like this, with everything that's impossible happening, that's still even less likely.
Yeah, and I think without Rowan doing this, they would have never figured out what they had to do, because he's like, listen, I know this sounds very weird, but it's very specific. Have you ever heard that term ever? We made that up. There's no other way. So I guarantee that my brother is still alive at least when they heard that word. So he has to be there.
Yeah, Azanalan. Like, that's not something you make up, or that's not something that's
It is
common.
something you make up.
Well,
But
it's not something that's common.
Yeah. And so Miras comes forward after they're kind of bickering back and forth, because he's like, I still don't believe you. And he's like, listen, maybe he did give this message so that he could save his brother's life. Because why would they pick Cleveland of all cities to come and attack? And we saw how they treated New Mombasa. And we saw how they do all these other places. They just glass the area.
Yeah, well, even then, like, when the Covenant are looking for something, they don't destroy the area. They clear it out, but they don't destroy the physical area. And so, again, why would they be coming to Cleveland? And why would they be asking about this key that this guy and his brother made up? And his brother being Colonel James Ackerson, who was also captured on Mars, theoretically.
And Ackerson knew the magic words to say, like, if you destroy the key, no more Halo.
Yeah, he's clearly where he is because he's smart. So he just had to get those buzz and those keywords in their head to make the Covenant freak out.
And then my favorite dumb phrase of this comic is that same Marine talking to Miras goes, "Hey, you're famous." And it's like, there's no reason for it. And like, it's real. Like people are like, "Oh, I know you." Like, shut the fuck up. Like, we got stuff going on.
Again, that realism bringing this down.
Yeah. And so the Miras and the Marine kind of start talking back and forth. And then you got Ruin kind of saying, "Hey, I told you, me and my brother did this. We're not making up that we made up the key. We're not making up the story that we're telling you now." And this is when the Marine then Rogers over to his command post or to his commander.
Yeah, and so they're going to go meet up with them and explain for the 17th time they made up the key.
And with this final frame we see with them leaving the city, once again, I'm a sucker. I am definitely a sucker for a good full frame.
Yeah, and this is a beautiful full frame.
Yeah, and so when you take a look at this, it's really cool. You've got 4 Pelicans leaving Cleveland in this kind of smoking wreck. It's still there. So the artist still paid attention to them going through and not fully, leveling the city, but they're smoking ruins.
Yeah, you see clearly the Covenant has done some damage there. And now the narrative switches back to Chief he's running down this hallway, and a chieftain comes out of nowhere, and you see him just throw a grenade behind him, and it just explodes.
It's the most casual murder he's committed on this now.
It should have don't have time. He's just gone. This might be one of my favorite things that we see Chief do throughout the franchise. It's just really just playing him up to be just the baddest fucking dude. And then, now it's at the ending, full frame shot, or full page shot, like Alex likes. We see the Dreadnought hovering above Earth. Yeah. And we see just the destruction going on in the air and just this battle ensuing.
Yeah, it's beautiful. We've got space battle. We've got seen stuff being attacked on Earth. It's awesome. And so then that concludes our third of 4 issues.
And now let's move on to the final issue of Halo Uprising. If you want to talk about a cover that has nothing to do with the comic, here's Chief on a hill looking down at a city with a Covenant sniper rifle. It's cool. It's beautiful. But, we never see this in the comic, and that's fine. Because, again, this is supposed to draw you in. I see this, and I'm instantly like, oh, my God, I need to pick up this cover.
It's beautiful. And I don't know if you noticed, even with those flames and stuff around, I think it's still sunset.
It is still sunset. He's a 4:30 man. 4:30. Master Chief is 4:30 p.m. man. Because I think this is taking place around November-ish, so I think that kind of adds up.
Yeah, we'll say that. Yeah, that's lore now.
Yeah. So yeah, now we're kind of in the sewer, and we see the soldiers along with Ruin and Miras making their way to what we find out is command. They're in the Cleveland sewers.
And we see that with this, the demeanor of the soldiers have kind of changed with Ruin. That they're kind of like, "Hey, look ahead. Don't touch a soldier. Keep going, boy." And he's like, "I'm not."
Or kid.
Yeah, kid. He's like, "I'm not kid." It's like, what are you talking about? And you kind of see that he's changed from him being a civilian to him being this asset that they don't really want to deal with. They need to just
or don't even want to risk him doing anything stupid or anything like that. He knows something they need.
Exactly. He's now just an asset that they have to bring to this place. And so then they break open into this open area within the sewers where they have a bunch of computers and workstations and terminals set up. So they've got an HQ underground. And so we then see this sculpted man with a beautiful face, as I might say, says, "What's this now?" And so you obviously telling that he is kind of the guy in command down here.
We have Sergeant Twyker running everything, and so we have to once again explain that Ruin made up the key. And even at one point, he's like, I don't care what this cat has to say. And they're like, no. Listen, you have to hear this.
He was kind of pissed at them. He was like, why'd you bring some civilians down here?
Yeah.
He's like, they got something to tell you. And he's like, I don't care. Deal with it later. I have other stuff to do. And then finally, when he brings up that he knows Ackerson, it's a whole different story.
Yeah, I know Ackerson, who is one of the top brass.
Yeah, and luckily, this officer down here with Sergeant Twyker, he has a tech guy with him who's let him just talk. Let's Let's see what he has to say.
You just assume he's a tech guy because he has glasses.
Yeah, and a cool bandana. He is. Because his name's Wesley. He's the Intel operations manager. I told you he's tech guy. And so tech guy. And so he's like, let me hear. And he's like, you know what I'm talking about. He's like, Asanalon, like I made that up. And so he's like, and it goes back to like the same conversation. You made it up. You know,
Oh, you and your brother made that up? Yeah. Well, that's crazy. Yeah, I know it's crazy, but that same conversation. It's a little gripe. We've heard that too many times in this freaking comic.
Yeah, and so, but it had to be done. Like, it had to be done with the story.
True.
And I think just because we're talking about it now, too, you kind of focus on it a lot as we're like, they're saying it again.
They're saying it again.
But he asks, again, like, why did you take him down the secure area? And finally he's like, Colonel James Ackerson is my brother. He's like, Ackerson? He's like, I trained with him.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, very small world kind of thing. Like, this is all working out as if, like, fate is bringing them all together.
Yeah, and I love the line. Like, the first line he gives is like, your brother owes me money from way back.
And he's like, yeah, sounds like him.
Yeah, it sounds just like him.
Yep.
And so we do have some conversations going back and forth about them talking about making up the key. And he's like, we did. And then we have Mears jump in, who's like, and I think the aliens captured his brother, and he told them about the key to screw with them. And I think she's kind of getting this idea too, and getting these civilian points of view of like, I think this is exactly what happened. And so they kind of go back and forth talking about, and we get the same thing from another soldier. It's like, hey, you look familiar. Like, kind of like
Twyker.
Yes, Twyker. Yeah, it's like putting her down, and you're like, come on, man. But then he says like, but then you have Rowan chime in like, hey guys, I'm still here. Just to let you know, there still is no key. I guess we still made it up.
Yeah, like, hey, why are we dancing around all this? It's made up. They're looking for something that is fake as hell.
Yeah. So then they go, okay, fine. We need a DNA test of him, basically. Like, we need to scan, figure out who this actually is, if he's his brother for real, or what's actually going on. We have to figure those things out.
Yeah, because this is the point. This is all so crazy that it's like, okay, let's at least confirm one thing, like, before we start believing the next thing and the next thing.
And that's when Rowan brings up, he's like, okay, let's get a key, or like, you know, like everyone's kind of talking like we should get a key, like we should set a trap for the brutes, and let's get a key for them because they want a key so they can get out of here. And that's when Mr. Tech Guy, as we will call him,
Yeah.
he comes up. He's like, no, we can do better than that. And that's when Rowan's like, what?
Before we even can figure out what they're going to do, the narrative now switches back to the dreadnought hovering over Earth, and we see the battle kind of ensuing in space. And so I assume he's talking to the IO station still, but he reaches out and says, hey, I'm surrounded by Covenant ships. I tried to kill the Prophet of Truth. I don't know where he's at right now. And so, you know, they're like, all right, well, stand by. And he's still just doing what he does. See some Covenant dialect. He's just killing everyone in sight, throwing 1,000,000 grenades at a time. Fa-boom across the screen.
He's fa-booming all over. It's great. And I love that earlier. It's like, you know, they said stand by for orders. He goes, all right, standing by for orders. And immediately he just starts firing at everything. He's like, I'll just wait here, I guess.
Yeah, because again, like, Chief's that kind of static, robotic character of like, they told me to stand by, so I will stand by. And, you know, as he's standing over a pile of Covenant corpses. And
then so he finishes up the corpses, finishes up this room. He gets another radio comm. It says, Sierra 117, what was that? Over. And he says, holding position. Over. You know, just very casually, like, I'm just still here. Like, don't worry about it. Yeah.
And then, you know, said, proceed to the bridge, new coordinates incoming.
And now we are outside of Cleveland in the burbs in Chagrin Falls, Ohio.
Yeah, kind of this like we'll see like all these old mom and pop shops surrounding, like almost like looks like a small town.
Yeah, this almost looks like a theater on the right with this little marquee.
Yeah.
And it's like little like dessert shop looking areas. Like, it's just a little quaint town.
Mm-hmm. And he's just kind of standing in the street, almost kind of looking nervous. And then he flashes back to someone saying, do you hear me? It's the tech guy explaining the plan, what's going to happen.
And so what they're saying is that through channels, they were able to communicate with the brutes and have a drop-off point that's basically a neutral zone that they can deliver the key over to them and, you know, and get out of there. Like that was the deal that they had. And so what they're saying is that they're going to offer that, but if they bite, which they'll probably do, that they'll have to send in one of our men. And so that's when Rowan's like, I'll do it. We shouldn't have to sacrifice good soldiers when I can go and deliver the key for them.
Well, you even got to think is like, even if he dies, he's assuming that his brother is dead. He's really not doing much with his life. I think he's just like, I'm going to be the hero for once. I'm not going to hide under the table like we saw when this comic first started. He's volunteering himself to be captured by brutes.
Yeah, to take that risk, because he even brings up that, I'll do the drop, or, whatever you call it. And he said, no, I should do it. It's my fault. He's putting this blame on them or on himself for what's happening to everybody else. And he says, if they ask me any questions about it, any of their childhood memories about what the key is, only he will know. Because let's say that James Ackerson did tell them, oh, it's with the dragons, like whatever little hint there would be, only he would know, and only he'd have like the time to relay it himself if it is a trap for some reason.
Yeah, so it's like it's not his fault, but it's this Cleveland invasion is happening because of him. So now he says, okay, I can play my part in this war finally.
Yeah, and that's like when the sergeant finally agrees with them. He's like, you know what? He does have a point. All we need all of our men to be able to fight. We can't spare anyone. So, and we need all the weapons we have. So we're going to send him unarmed, for this reason.
Yeah, because I can't send him armed or he will die right there on the spot.
Yeah, and then this last panel is kind of what you get an idea of what's going to happen, because you have tech guys saying, sir, with all due respect, we don't want to give classified covert op to a civilian. And then that's when you have the sergeant say, this ain't a covert op. You know what this is. And so it kind of gives us this weird inkling into what's going to happen.
Yeah, he's going on some kind of weird mission that's not a covert mission into or behind enemy lines.
Yeah, and you're kind of thinking, okay, even if they just do the key handoff, he's probably going to be taken up by brutes. And if it's a trap, he's taken. So it's a suicide mission for the most part.
It kind of from his understanding or what we're starting to pick up.
Yeah, because you may not make it back. So, you have a small chance of, because you're not delivering anything. You're delivering yourself as the key.
Yeah, and then we kind of see, flashes forward to a Phantom hovering right above him, and a beam comes down and the brutes are going to approach him here. And then it goes back to him talking to Miris about, she doesn't want him to do it.
Yeah, so she kind of chimes in and says, why are you doing this? She's saying, this is definitely not the same guy I found hiding under a desk yesterday.
Yeah.
And he says, yeah, how about that? Like, ugh.
I grew balls.
Yeah. And she's like, I can get us out of here. Some of these guys know my music. Like, I can work my charm. And he's saying, and they're joking again. He's like, I heard Famous can be cool like that. Like, he's like, still has that charm you've kind of seen through him through the issue, which has been awesome. And you can see him definitely struggling with this, because he's like, I think I have to do this. And, she says, well, what if your brother was trying to save you from all this? Like, what if like his dying wish was that? And it goes back to like, maybe he was, but he saved me. Maybe he also saved me to do this.
Yeah.
And then they have this really, really beautiful moment where, she says that, so maybe that is the incentive for you, is like, you want to help people and get out of this alive. And he's like, yeah, it's a pretty good incentive. And she's like, I'm alive because of you. Like, you have been this kind of rock for us. But he admits it was both of us.
Yeah. It was, a two-way road.
Yeah, it's a two-way road with it. And what I love is that, like, you have this really endearing moment between the two of them. And, she says, or he asks, he said, hey, will you write a piece of music about this? Like, about it? And she's like, I guarantee it. And she's like, come back and I'll play it for you. And then they have this super, super beautiful moment where they just hug together, because they kind of both know.
Yeah.
Like, they kind of both know this mission that he's going on to. And then you have Tech Guy come over and says, it's time. They want to meet. They want the key. And you can just see them kind of crying.
Yeah. They want him, or, they want the key. So then as he's standing there, flash forward now to the present, he is surrounded by all these brutes, and a chieftain approaches and says, we want the key. And he just says, okay. And they said, where is it? He says, it's me. I'm the key.
Yeah.
So now he is technically delivering the key, but he's telling them, I am that key.
Yeah, and goes into it and says, because it's a really cool setup, because we were kind of hearing before when we're like, this isn't a regular mission. Mm-hmm. I have a better idea of what to send them. So he's actually sending him.
Yeah, and then narrative changes. Now we're at Chief fighting off more Covenant. I feel like we've said that
well
80 times.
At least this time he is making his way to the bridge.
Yeah. And, we see a cool shot of him with it, just shooting, brutes in the face, killing grunts.
And so now we cut away from Chief, who's kind of communicating over to IO, kind of talking about that the ship is on its own course. Like, I can't do anything about it. Mm-hmm. It's going this way. And they said over. And then we go over to the Prophet of Truth's quarters. And then we have the same question he asked earlier. Commanders, the Unholy One's still aboard. And they're like, we've taken control of the bridge. The Spartan is not here. We don't know.
Yeah, it's kind of like, oh, shit, you're asking the wrong guy.
Yeah, the guy who did know, Steve the Brute, he was murdered earlier on. And he did know. He told Jerry, who in marketing, Jerry,
Jerry marketing.
He died too. He took a spiker right to the chest. So that's unfortunate, but we don't know.
We had these interns, these grunts.
We had the interns. They were great guys. Don't get me wrong.
Unfortunately, dead because of the demon too. Yeah. So it's an I don't know right now. We'll get back to you.
We'll table it for now. So they're going back and forth, and there's the panic of like, where is he? Like, why have you not found it? And so he says, they're talking back and forth. He says, it's Holiness. It's best to get off this ship. Like, we have to get off.
He has a fucking ghost right now. He's just killing everyone. We need to get out of here.
Yeah, and the Prophet's saying, it's one human. What are you guys doing?
Pal, have you played Halo Combat Evolved or 2? If you would have, known that it's not just a human. It's the Spartan, my friend.
Yeah, and so as Jesse said, they're like, he's commandeered a ghost. And he's headed out of an airlock. And I said, illuminate him. And I like that they use that term. When I first read it, I was like, oh, I get it. Plasma.
Yeah. Illuminate, brighten them up.
I like that.
Yep.
And so we see the next panel with this kind of flaming ball going out of one of what looks like
the ports.
The ports or bays they have. And so you see one of the brutes, say target destroyed. He's kind of like on a little intercom. Mm-hmm. Target destroyed. And so most holy. So then this is where we go back. So they've kind of gone over, and you see that smirk on the Prophet's face. He's like, mm-hmm. And then you have another report that's the word from Earth, from the Cleveland, as they say. We have obtained the key of Asanalan, a human aboard, the harbinger of piety.
And the narrative kind of switches back, and we see that Ruin is being...
So he's back underground before he's captured by the birds.
Yeah, we're flashing back, and he's being injected with a tracker, like a kind of like, let's say, nanobots.
Yeah, so basically they're saying they'll pick up anything, but this will mix in with your blood, and it looks a lot like blood plasma. Mm-hmm. And it's basically... tracker like you'd have like with a chip you'd install in your pet or something like that.
Yeah, so they gave him this and they said, we can't give you any weapons, but we can do this. That way we can track you and know your whereabouts at any given time.
Yeah, and so we keep seeing these kind of panel by panel where it'll cut to the brutes like pointing all their spikers right at him and then grabbing him and telling him to come into the ship, but then also cutting back to the sergeant saying, at this level, they're dumb. They're dumb worker bees who work with guns and armor. The second that they kind of scope you out, they'll notice there's nothing wrong. You're just some weak human. They'll allow you aboard. They'll panic, knowing they don't have like a key to give, so they'll call command. And it's a really cool play-by-play. Like you'd see, I mean, it's a very cinematic play-by-play. Like you'd see like any type of movie that's setting this up, which is real cool. And they'll think about it, but then they'll probably take you aboard and take you right over to one of their higher-in commands.
Yeah, and that's exactly what they do.
And so, they say, you may, even if they do that, you may be tortured, you may be captured and just stuck there.
Sets them up for, like, what's going to happen. It's like your life is probably going to be a living hell after this.
Yeah. At the best of it, you meet up with the Prophet and have to deal with that. At the worst of it, you're tortured and beaten for intel. He's like, I'll never tell. And they said, oh, well, wouldn't that be big? And like the commanders or the sergeant's kind of riffing with him and, treating him like a soldier now, like, because he is sacrificing his life with it. And they said, whatever they'll do, it'll be a hot spot. Like, it'll be important. Like, you're not just going to go to some random, like, prison thing. Like, you're going to go to a place that really matters. And, they said, once your coordinates are beaming back to us when you're in command, like, we'll go ahead and we'll use you as the target. And even them big alien assholes won't know what's going on.
Yeah, and I like that the sergeant even says, your brother was an asshole, but he was a badass.
Yeah.
Like, we all kind of respected him for that. So seeing that, when we first meet Ackerson, he's kind of a huge prick, and now we're kind of learning that he does have the respect of some people. At least, some guy that he went to boot camp with.
Yeah, and I love this ending thing. We have the sergeant saying, they got to him and he sent them here. And then you have Rowan say, so we just wait for them to call back.
And then the next panel, he has a hood over his head and he's in the back of a Phantom being transported to the higher ups that they talked about. And now we see the Covenant cruiser, Harbinger of Piety. And this is right by that dreadnought that Truth and Chief are on. So he gets his hood taken off. He's surrounded by brutes and a prophet.
Yeah, and so we see it from afar. I mean, we're not really sure because it looks like a prophet from right there. But then we get the intel that they're in the chamber of the Minister of Inquisitions on the Harbinger of Piety. So obviously, like, the interrogator.
Yep, the guy who's just going to mess you up and make your life a living hell.
And so he goes, human. So this is the key of a Sanalon, and he's like, yep. Yep, it is.
That's me, pal. It's like the interrogation starts, and basically, he's like, okay, so you're the key. What do you open? And as this is happening, Io is coming to Chief, like, hey, we're going to have some firepower coming your way real quick. Like, they're also saying, like, your coordinates are being uploaded, and then it's going back to this minister saying, like, what do you do, like, for Halo, or like, what do you know of Halo? And he's kind of confused. He's like, Halo?
Yeah, and at the same time, we go back to all of our guys in Cleveland, and they're saying, okay, he's stopped moving. He's obviously there. Let's go ahead and start targeting him, and they fully lock onto a target. And then this is where cut back to Chief, and I said, it's a little hard to target in your radius. Immediate evasive action required. So this is where we're seeing that they're like, we got some shit coming your way, my friend.
Yeah, you need to get the hell out of there. And so then, like, the next scene, Chief is outside of the dreadnought. He's just hanging on the side. And they're like, all right, Chief, you need to get the hell out of there. Like, you need a way to get home. And he says, I'm on it. Over. And that's the last we see of Chief. And it kind of, that's what leads into Chief. He takes a piece off the dreadnought and falls into Earth, starting Halo 3. But we're not done with the story yet.
Nope. So we finish up Chief's portion of it, but then we go back to Rowan. And it's one of those, like, just really beautiful kind of ending moments with this brute's talking to him his own dialect, and he's just kind of in his own world. He's going back
his eyes are closed, and it's like almost his head is tilted back. He's like drifting off.
Yeah, he's reminiscing. He's seeing him and his younger brother running around with swords and cardboard again, or as Jesse would think, a bunch of techie gizmo gadgets as kids have in that age. So running around, and it's a really serene, beautiful flashback for him.
And then the narrative comes back to the present, and this is where the prophet's like, you think we're stupid, but like we know that your friends are tracking you. Like, they're not going to be able to come rescue you. You're screwed. Yeah. And he's like, son, I'm the target. And he's like, whoa, what?
Yeah.
Yeah, and basically he says, I'm the target that they're going to fire at. And the minister says, what? And his last words are, kiss my ass. And then the carrier is no more.
Yeah, so that Nasu station Mac platform just fires a Mac rounds as the Mac rounds fire and just decimate that cruiser.
Yep, and so this was a suicide mission through and through. And now we're back around Mars, and we see Ackerson. And so I like that he's got the shit kicked out of him. He's covered in blood. And they said, Ackerson, there is no key. He said, there is no key. And he's like, are you asking a question or stating a fact? And he's laughing at this point. He's like, how many of you died looking for that key? Like, you fucking idiots.
And I love that he's just like, oh, man, that was a good one, even for me. Like, you guys are fucking stupid.
Like, he's laughing in their faces. And then he's like, you guys are going to lose. Like, we're going to win. And right as he says that, he's decapitated. And this is where we see the end of Colonel James Ackerson. So what he did is he went down. I think he did this to save his brother, but also to just fuck with the Covenant as much as humanly possible. And in the end, he went down smiling and laughing at them.
And I love that, like, Ackerson, as far as we can tell and what we've read about and heard about, he never really ever picked up a weapon, but he killed more Covenant right there than most other soldiers ever have.
Yeah, like you never see him, like even when he was supposed to be in the battlefield, he got himself out of it, but he was still being tortured and interrogated, and he still found a way to fight.
Yep.
Like, it's fucking awesome. Like, that's amazing.
And honestly, we'll go into this as we recap, but that is such a cool ending for a character that we originally hated at the beginning.
Yeah.
Kind of understood a little bit in the middle when he's making the Spartan 3s.
Ghost of Onyx, yeah.
And then now kind of this really cool, badass ending for him.
Yeah. So it was like I had never read this before, so I was like, oh my God, I like Ackerson. He can be a dick. He can be an asshole. But when it comes down to it, he is looking at Earth's best interests. So now, we're at a relief camp in Ohio, and we see a bunch of civilians just hanging around this camp, and we see Miris writing that song for Ruin.
And then we finally end our amazing group of stories.
Yeah, kind of these 2 or 3 stories happening all at the same time.
Yeah, and I love it. And this is such a great panel because we have James and Ruin back when they were kids, and James is saying, hey, wait for me, and Ruin's saying, kiss my ass, as they're running through that field. And it's just like 4 kind of culminations of a beautiful ending story. You could have ended at any 4 of those moments, and it would have just been a beautiful, serene ending for it.
Yeah, and that's it.
Yeah.
That is Halo Uprising. I did not know what to expect coming into this. I thought it was going to be lots of guns, lots of shots, lots of action. I didn't think that Bendis was really going to tie this down and make us feel a lot, other than like, I thought it was going to be just a issue where it's like, yeah, fuck yeah, Chief's just shooting a bunch, instead of just, you really relate with these characters and you feel sad by the end of it,
You do, and this is another one of those stories that I really love, that your main characters are not Chief related, they're not dealing with any of that, and you somehow come to just love all of them, which is so good. And
even Ackerson, he makes us like Ackerson.
Which is, that's a tough one.
Because we started this podcast saying Ackerson was a dick.
Yeah. Before we continue on, we're going to kind of give you guys some more details. I wanted to touch back and give some more credit where credit is due in this issue.
Yes.
So as we said, Brian Michael Bendis was the writer. Alex Maleev was the artist. But we also had Matt Hollingsworth, who was the colorist for this, which is beautiful colors.
Amazing.
Chris Elopoulos was the letterer. Ruin, boom, there you go. We're already in there. Ruin Jadalik, I believe that is how you say it, was the editor. Joe Casada was the editor-in-chief, and then, as we said earlier, Dan Buckley was the publisher. So I really wanted to give a big shout-out to all of those guys and make sure that we did mention everyone in this, because most of the time, a lot of these guys may get glanced over because we have kind of Brian and Alex being the heads of this.
Their names are on the cover, right?
Yeah, the names on the cover. The foreword and the afterword are kind of all about them, but really wanted to give shout-out to everyone else in between that before we continue on.
Yeah, so we have all 4 of these issues. Now, typically, whenever you're going to have a comic book come out in 4 series, you're going to get, it's going to be a 4-month span. That wasn't really the case with Uprising. Not a single issue of Halo Uprising was released when it was supposed to, due to continuity errors, along with writer Brian Michael Bendis working on Secret War as well. Issue 1 was delayed from July 18th, 2007 to August 22nd, 2007.
So not too bad for first issue. It's only about a month.
No. A month is fine. The second issue was delayed several times from August 29th, 2007. That was the original release date, to November 21st, 2007.
So a little bit worse.
3 months.
Not a little bit worse. Not the end of the world, but it was worse.
Yeah. Issue 3 was delayed almost 10 times from September 26, 2007, the original release date, to August 13th, 2008.
Well, here's the thing. It wasn't a full year.
It was not a full year.
You got to think about that. You did get it
at that 11-month mark.
Yeah, you got it 11 months later.
Issue 4 was delayed again almost 10 times from the original release date of October 31st, 2007 to April 15th, 2009.
What?
There's no justification for that one.
Well, it's not a decade.
It's not 2 years.
It came out. It was published.
It was a good story.
Yeah,
nonetheless.
And here's the thing. At the time, if you were dedicated to this and you had heard the announcement of Uprising and knew that it was going to be this four-part series, the first delay, you're like, whatever, I'm still going to get the issue. Awesome. Second one, that super sucks, but it's only a couple months later. On that third and fourth, man, that would be tough to really keep up with that.
Especially if you were married to this and there was hype around this. We'll talk about here in a minute. But let's go into there was some variations of the release versions. So you could have just those 4 issues.
Yes, the 4 individual comics themselves.
Yeah. You have the hardback issue containing all 4 issues, which also has interviews with Maleev and Bendis, along with Frank O'Connor and Brian Gerard.
Yeah.
And they do kind of a quick overview of the graphic novel. We have that. That's what we used. It's really super cool to have. Some people were asking us on our Discord and Instagram. You can find it on Amazon or eBay for like $30.
Yeah, it's not bad. And it's like, once again, going back, as we said in the graphic novel, what I love with graphic novels is you could always pick it up, reread it, but also just look at the badass art.
Yeah, because this does include some of just the stencils or like the outlines of the art with no color. Still pretty phenomenal. But you also have the Halo Oversized Collection, a collection of Halo graphic novels released through Marvel Comics containing Uprising, Bloodline, and Helljumper. We will be covering Bloodline and Helljumper, just so you guys know. So if you want to read ahead, go for it, because we will be covering those eventually. So now let's talk about the general reaction of this comic. As with most Halo projects, the initial release would be a huge success, and this was no different with Uprising, with the first issue selling out in less than 24 hours. Though with the delay of the following 3 issues, it would be impossible to keep the hype that was built around the first issue.
And that would be for anything. If you were telling me, like, you get like the best comic book that's ever been created was coming out, and it was 4 of them, boom, pick them up. Second one's a little bit okay. But you're right. Once you have almost a year and then almost 2 years of gap time, you've already kind of forgotten the story. You might have sold your issue. You might have pitched it. Like,
there's a small circle of people, and I'm just assuming, because by all means, in 2007, I wasn't really paying it. I had little knowledge about Halo other than what I was playing with, like Halo 2 and Halo 3. Sure as hell didn't know they were making comics. I knew about some books, but you better believe my attention span in early days of high school, I would have forgotten about this initially. And I think a lot of people did. There are clearly a few fans that were married to this project, but it definitely fell off, with that hype. But I will say, first issue selling out in less than 24 hours is phenomenal, and they had to do a reprint. So I can only imagine how much those first editions probably are.
Yeah, I mean, it's really cool. And you'll get that with a lot of comics that kind of build the hype around it. It's just unfortunate that this took too long, because I think that definitely hurt sales. It definitely hurt a continuation of this story if one were to happen.
Yeah, I kind of think that would have just been, like, they could have done more and maybe worked with Bendis and Maleev a little more, but I think just with everything going on, it didn't happen.
Yeah.
Many critics would fault the story that would seem to be centered around the Master Chief, but we would see others take the spotlight instead. The lack of Master Chief in the comic would haunt Uprising like it almost did the graphic novel.
Which is so dumb.
My only thing about it, I will say, is when you have 4 issues with Chief on all 4, It is a little misleading. I get that you have to have Chief to sell because still Chief is the face of the franchise at the time.
Especially, yeah.
So I can understand that, but I can also see how if you're a casual gamer or a hardcore Halo guy who wants to pick up a comic and learn, you see Chief looking like a badass on these comics, you pick it up and then you're like, what the hell?
Yeah. In my opinion, I think he gave us just the right amount. And we'll get into opinions a little bit later, but I think it was just the right amount. I think it was for the hardcore gamers that wanted that shoot, kill, boom, boom. There's plenty of that, and it's done expertly.
Well, I think that Bendis wrote this for comic book fans while kind of trying to appeal to Halo fans, because you can see a fucking seasoned veteran writing this. There's no ifs, ands, or
100%.
but. Like, this was such a good story to tell. Like, there's no way some guy first year of writing. Like, this guy was wanting to appeal to people who would truly understand it. And again, we did get Chief, bang, bang, shoot, Faroom, whatever.
Vroom, boom, boom, shloom,
Yeah,
shloom.
whatever was going on. I think overall, though, that I can see both ends. I could see why people are disappointed. I can also see people, telling them to shut up and it kind of being justified.
Yeah. And once again, we're taking this from our goggles of 2019, and we're not doing this back then when issues are released and when Halo 2 is still fresh in the mind with Halo 3 coming.
Yeah, Halo 3, you got to think this first issue came out about a month before, or even a few weeks before Halo 3 came out. So the point of this is you wanted to see a little more insight into that, but unfortunately we never did. So like clearly, they're including those things from Halo 3, but you only got so much before you realize, April 15, 2009, Halo 3's been out for 18 months at this point. So like, I'm not looking at this for any kind of insight into the universe. So let's go on to the lore now. If you're looking for this, or if you're looking at this comic and you want to learn some more lore, what does this do for the lore? What do we learn? Which the first thing we see is we see what Chief did on that dreadnought. We see the battle that ensued, him just going batshit crazy, balls to the wall, and beating every ass in sight, which I loved it. It was awesome.
And it definitely gives us that start to 3 instead of you just rocketing out of the sky and landing in the jungle for Johnson to be like, hey, he's fine.
Yeah, like you get on the dreadnought and then jump off of it. Like, I never knew. I never knew that any of this happened before then. So definitely seeing this, like, okay, he only had to leave because he was going to get blown up. He even tried to kill Truth, and it was cool to see Truth fighting back. Like, that's something you didn't think you would ever see.
Yeah, he's just not. He's not that kind of frail. He's still a frail prophet, but still shows like some teeth.
Exactly. We're backed in the corner. You'd never know what a dog's going to do. We also see another area that the Covenant invaded, just beyond Antarctica, Africa.
Cute.
We see Cleveland, of all people, of course, but then, we've learned why. Still really cool to see, this small battle, not small, this big battle for Cleveland during the events between Halo 2 and 3. And we also see Ackerson's grueling fate, what ends up of him, because you never think to know. I never knew. I was like, okay, he probably just faded off into existence. Like, no, he gets captured, he gets tortured, and by the end of it, he goes down with a smile on his face, losing his own head.
That's where the only part that I kind of have an issue with is that Ackerson's always pretty much kind of been that book boy for us. And now that you are killing him off in this, for me, it would alienate the book crowd who've been kind of following his story throughout that. And if they didn't pick this up, you're kind of like, well, what happened?
Yeah, you're like, who is this guy? I don't know, man. I have mixed feelings on it. I can see your point, but I think I like that at the end of the day, like when he's backed in the corner, he shows his teeth. So I like how they wrote him off. I personally don't have a problem with it. There wasn't a lot I had a problem that I had a problem with when it came to this comic. Little things like, the whole like reoccurring, oh, you're famous, and then, oh, I have to explain the key thing 17 times. But at the end of the day, you also got to think that by the end of this, I would have had 18 months between reading that third issue and that fourth issue.
Well, again, and they're separated. And the big thing, too, is both of them recurring helped part of the story along, where, oh, you're famous. Oh, I know you. She admits, hey, if you don't want to do this, I've got clout. I can get us out of here now. And, him saying, no, this has to be done, I think was kind of where all that was kind of pushed together.
I can see that. And, let's, I guess, talk about overall, like we have been, but what we think about it. I think, it told a great story. I know you and I talked about it on break at one point that you can tell that Maleev traces faces, which you get that realism. But with main characters, you should stick to one model. And by all means, maybe he did. But there are times where the main character, Ruin, it looks like he modeled after 5 or 6 different people. Maybe that's his art style. But in the same with, the other character, the main character, is that they looked like different people throughout the comic, even like per issue, And maybe that's what he did. I don't know. Maybe we should look into that and revisit this. But there was a little bit of inconsistency with that. It was just completely different faces. But I think overall his art style was superb with capturing those expressions of fear and sadness and seeing love in between two people.
Yeah, I have to agree totally. I think, like you said, I think that's my only gripe was there was a couple panels when we flip pages where we go, who are they talking? Oh no, they're talking to Rowan. He's
just making a weird face.
He's got a big boxy face now, and it was just kind of like off. But that's fine. That's an art style, and if that's how it's done, it's okay. We figured it out. As far as the rest of the art style and the writing of it, it's expert. I super enjoyed it.
As I said, there's no way you can't see a seasoned veteran doing this, and by all means, Bendis is a very well-known comic book artist or comic book writer. So by all means, you get a big name like that on here, and he was thrilled to do it, and you give him creative freedom to do that, you're going to get a very good product out of the end of it.
Well, and you have to figure both of the Ackersons, they lived it up to they took Halo up to 11 with it. Like that whole like badassery of like, I'm going to give the Covenant back their bomb.
Yeah.
Like it's that type of feel of it where like, I kind of did. He gave him the coordinates. He's like, kiss my ass.
Yeah.
And then you have James, the same end. He's just like, oh, you guys did that? You're fucking dumb.
You big dumb idiots.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. And there's character development. Within 4 issues, there's character development. You have a guy that was hiding under a table, now is like, I'm going to be the target. I'll go down fighting. Like, I'm perfectly fine with that. His last words were, kiss my ass.
And it goes back to that same line with Miras that's talking about, Rowan, you saved me. And I think with that last panel where we see her, she's a refugee, doesn't have that glitz and money anymore, but she's writing her own music and she's writing that tale. And I think he, through that sacrifice, gave her life and allowed her to live her own life, and is a really awesome, cool story arc as well.
Yeah, well, it's not even like just gave her life to breathe another day, but gave her a life that she wants to live. She's now going to go off on her own and do what makes her happy and write about a man that she fell in love with in a very short amount of time when they were both just as desperate as one another. So yeah, that's it. That's Halo Uprising, and maybe we sound like broken records. 5 out of 5. Great book. Pick it up if you can, and let us know what you think about it.
Yeah. If you can, like, that's great. For those of you who don't necessarily want to buy it, check out your local library. Check out things like that. Like, they have plenty of resources for those type of things. Because we would love for you guys to kind of be a part of this with us. And that's why we do seek out some of the sponsorships we do and do seek out some of these things, because we want you guys to be informed, to have those resources at your fingertips, and to join our community. And on that, I want to kind of push, we just had another super, super awesome game night this past Saturday.
Yep.
We pushed some new game modes. We had some new members, which is super, super awesome. I love to see that grow.
Yeah.
And this next one we're having, which we'll announce on Instagram, be 2 weeks-ish, 1 week when this is released, will be a total Halo 3 episode, pushing for our next episode.
Yeah. The session will be all Halo 3 game types, more so than we play sometimes. But yeah, in preparation for our next episode, which is, spoiler alert, Halo 3. Lots of cool things in the work for that. I'm very excited about this one. It's going to be our biggest episode yet.
Yeah, it's going to be our biggest yet, and it's going to be, I think, really the one that Jesse and I put a lot of work into, a lot of favors to ask, and a couple of things we've pulled, which I'm super excited about.
Yeah, exactly.
So we'll see you guys there.
Yeah, we'll see you in 2 weeks. And with that, I'm your host, Jesse Reiners.
And I'm your host, Alex Kendall.
And thank you for tuning in to Finish the Fight, a Halo podcast.
Halo. It's finished.
No, I think we're just getting started.